Hey everyone, I'm Armored Gaming, welcome back to my channel, and welcome to a monster analysis on Helgudin. When Helgudin crossed the Rainbow Bridge, Olnair told her she wasn't allowed into the magical ancient city behind the gates she guards. However, Helgudin isn't one to take no for an answer, and her intentions aren't just to enter the city, she wants to rule it. Here we have the latest and newest Dark Legendary monster with another fantastic monster design. I swear, these two monsters, Helgudin and Olnair, they are some of the best I've seen in Monster Legends. And with that being said, let's jump right into the monster stats. Her power is tied with Olnair at 3696, making this monster officially the strongest Dark Legendary monster. She outplaced Krugbo and Balthazar, who used to previously have the record with a power of 3575. And again, even in terms of every single monster that's ever been released, all legendary monsters, this is by far one of the highest in the whole entire game. It is tied for third place along with Olnair, Warmaster Ragnarok, Talos the Island Protector, and it's third only to Rador and Makugin, who are currently in first and second place respectively. As for this monster's life, it is 36,191, which is actually a really great life in the Dark category. Currently in the Dark category, the tankiest monster is Dun Raw, followed by Soul Hugger, Warmaster Necromancer, Flawless, War Spells, Samael, Plague Carrier, and Fever Scatter, and then we have this monster. So pretty tanky life considering all the dark monsters we have in the whole entire game. And as for speed, 3476, this is one of the higher speeds in the dark category. Nowadays there's just super fast monsters, 3498 and above. We have monsters with a speed of 3575, 3542, but nonetheless 3476 continues to be one of the faster speeds in the dark category. But what makes this monster even better is her trait. She is hardened and she has the area dodge trait, meaning she is completely unaffected by AoE skills. So if you're facing a really fast monster, a really fast Kihaku that does his AoE possession and freeze, that won't touch you. If you're facing a really strong monster, let's say you're facing a super strong light legendary monster that does a super powerful ultimate attack light damage AoE, it's not going to hit you. The dodge area is by far one of the most powerful traits that's ever been released in Monster Legends that can make players from the offensive perspective be able to take on some of the stronger bases if you just utilize this trait. So that's incredible. And then what's interesting about this monster, she is an attacker and she can hold the double sword relic. So with double swords, you can utilize so many things depending on what you have. For example, let's say you mega possess the enemy team. Well, let's say you have two soul shattering swords, you can use the sword to essentially remove all of their stamina from them, depending on what level your swords are. Or you can even do it with a soul shattering greatsword, because if the enemy is possessed or stunned, the enemy will lose stamina. Or you can even give yourself a shield if the enemy is frozen or stunned. You can even deal extra damage depending if the enemy is frozen or stunned. Or if you happen to have the diamond swords, look at that, Jakugin, after hitting if target's life is below 50%, it deals, let's level this up to max level. It deals 12,000 points of physical damage to all enemies, and it has two uses. If you have double Jakugin sword, that's 24k points of physical damage. Twice. That's 48k damage just with your sword relics alone. Or if you have Solaris' sword, or maybe you can do Solaris' and Jakugin. Or if you have Nishin's sword, you can even utilize that. The sword relic everyone hates can actually be utilized on this monster. It's like Nishin's sword was designed for this monster. After hitting the target has nightmares, it deals 12,000 points of dark damage, so the same as the Jakugin sword, but the caveat here is that the enemy needs to have nightmares. So right here, their life needs to be below 50%. Right here, all the enemy needs to do is have nightmares, and apart from dealing that dark damage, you also remove 180 points of stamina. And this has two uses, and this is actually very significant because you're going to find that this monster has an AoE nightmares. So by doing the AoE nightmare skill, you can actually trigger your Nishin's sword. So it's a very interesting and powerful thing you can do with this monster, and I'll talk about it in a little bit. Let's just move on to the skills. Until Hell is Frozen, deals massive dark damage to enemies, applies nightmares, and bleed to all of the enemy monsters, 70 dark base damage. You also apply nightmares, which will remove 10% of stamina for the next 3 turns from the enemy, removes 5% of their HP, and bleeding will reduce 10% of their HP for the next 3 turns, and reduce enemy damage output by 20%. So fantastic ultimate for this attacker. And again, if you have Nishin's sword and you get your ult, that will trigger Nishin's sword. Let's move on. In skills group 1, there's only one skill we're talking about, and that's Loki's Touch, which applies dark weakness to one single enemy monster, and you give yourself an immediate extra turn. This has a 20 stamina cost, a 2-turn cooldown, and the cool thing about this is literally it's just, hey, you're now weak to dark-based attacks, my attacks are 50% stronger, and I now get to hit you with a dark-based attack. It's also cool because if you're facing other dark-based monsters, normally when you face a dark-based monster, you deal less damage against them. Well, you can just apply that dark weakness, and that's pretty much negated. So I like Loki's Touch a lot. Yes, it's skills group 1, but it is definitely worth running. On to skills group 2 we go. We have Visions of the Damned. Deals heavy dark damage to one enemy, applies nightmares to one enemy. The interesting thing about this skill is look at that extremely low stamina cost. 10 stamina, 1-turn cooldown. It is just a basic dark nightmare attack. I don't think it's worth running, but I just think the stamina cost is something funny. There Will Be Blood. This skill deals moderate special damage to all enemies, 35 special base damage, and it makes all of the enemies bleed. Bleeding, once again, very powerful because it reduces enemy HP by 10% for the next 3 turns, but it also reduces the damage output, which reduces the likelihood, or not reduces the likelihood, it reduces their damage output against you by 1/5. And this has a 25 stamina cost with a 2-turn cooldown if I didn't already mention. Next we have Spirit of Balder. Removes shields from all enemies. Applies immunity to control to itself. It's nice that you have a control immunity skill for yourself. However, I don't necessarily think the skill is worth running. That being said though, if you find yourself in a situation where you're facing like an earth monster that you know can apply a shield. Let's say you're facing General Tomb, Inquisitor Fullman, someone that can give their team some sort of full life shield, 50% shield. Well then, this could be worth running. Or maybe you're facing a Zyron the Ruby, who you know can do Ruby Explosion. Well, maybe it would be useful to run Spirit, just to give yourself some sort of protection against a Mega Freeze, a Mega Stun, a Mega Possession. So the great thing about being able to swap skills for gold is that even though this skill isn't like a must-have in your top 4 skills, you could replace it with one of the other skills for when the situation calls for it. So do keep this skill in mind. Moving on to skills group 3, we have a special base skill right here, which deals massive special damage to one enemy and applies bleed to one enemy. 65 damage, 25 stamina cost, 1-turn cooldown. That is amazing. That is very, very amazing how easily you can rotate this skill. Now, especially if you run Loki's Touch, even if you don't benefit from the dark weakness, the fact that you can do this skill on turn 1 and on turn 2 do Loki's Touch and rotate back into this skill, you can attack 2 enemy monsters with 65 special base damage and give them bleeding. I think that's quite powerful. Depending on the runes you have, depending on the swords you have, this has the potential to OTK. It goes without saying you should definitely take advantage of this skill. We have Blades of Nightmares, and this is the skill I was talking about. Deals moderate dark damage, applies nightmares to all enemies. Because you have an AoE Nightmares, you can utilize this with Nishin Sword and take advantage of that extra damage, that extra dark damage, and that stamina draining. So this monster, even though you're an attacker, you can technically be a denier in terms of stamina drain with Nishin Sword. Like, technically speaking, you could, if you wanted to, you could give this monster 3 speed runes and just stamina drain if you had Nishin Sword. This is the same thing I made a video not too long ago about, what's her name? Little Red Fairy Cap. Little Red Fairy Cap is another monster that can do AoE Nightmares and can hold double sword. But it's so much nicer to have a faster monster with a higher power that can do that. So again, I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying you could potentially do it. But even better, you would just treat this monster as a regular attacker, give this monster 2 strength runes or 1 strength rune, and then just give the Nishin Sword and do the AoE Nightmares, and it still works out. So definitely run this skill with Nishin Sword if you can. And then we also have Dark Submission, which deals heavy dark damage to enemies and applies dark weakness to all the enemy monsters, not just one of them, all of them. So what are the good skills for this monster? Well, we have Dark Submission, Blades of Nightmares, we have this other skills group 3 skill, we have There Will Be Blood, and we have Loki's Touch. We have 5 really superb skills to choose from. Spirit, which you could use depending on the situation. So what 4 skills are you always going to go with? That's a tough one, right? That's a tough one. The advantage of There Will Be Blood is the fact that it's a special based AoE bleeding skill. The advantage of Blades of Nightmares is the fact that it is an AoE Nightmares. The advantage of Dark Submission is that it is 45 damage. So it's the stronger of your AoEs, and Dark Submission actually sets up for Blades of Nightmares because now the enemy will be weak to dark-based attacks. Now, of course, if you run Loki's Touch will make one enemy monster weak to dark-based attacks. So if you do Loki's Touch and then you do like Blades of Nightmares, for example, that is 60 dark-based damage to a single enemy monster, 40 to the rest, and AoE Nightmares to everyone. So what do you do with this monster? Like, do you rely on the AoE combos? Do you just do single 65 target to a single enemy monster? What do you do with this monster? If you can turn transfer with this monster, well then, like Sammy, if you can partner this monster up with Sammy, you'll get a 50% damage increase, you'll get increased accuracy, you can do Dark Submission, so the Dark Weakness most likely will land, and then on the next turn, you also have your increased accuracy and your damage boost, then you can Blades of Nightmares, and it's a super easy 2-hit knockout. If you don't have a turn transfer, so you can do this combo, then maybe you should rely on the single target hit. It's so situational, it depends, right? It depends on who your team is. If you can partner this monster up with like a Dun Raw, then it's a lot easier to use this combo. What runes do you want in this monster? Well, you're an attacker, so 2 strength runes and a single speed. You could maybe even do 2 speed and a high level strength, like a level 10 strength. If you're relying on the Dark Submission Blades of Nightmares combo, there's just so much you can do with this monster. The fact, again, that you can hold 2 swords, if you have the diamond swords, it makes it even easier. The fact that this monster has the area dodge trait, you can even partner this monster up with Brutalis. If you saw my previous video with Brutalis and Shade Moon, it'll essentially work the same way, except even better because Shade Moon has a status caster dodge area, whereas this one is permanent, it's not going to disappear. So as long as you have Brutalis, you're protected from single-based attacks from non-AoEs, and then your trait protects you from AoEs, so you always get a guaranteed churn in. So you always get to do something. So overall, I gotta say, I really like this monster, and currently in the game, there's just so many monsters that you can synergize with. So I want you guys to let me know in the comments below, if you had this monster, who would you partner up with this monster? What combo would you do? What skill set would you run? What would be your ideal go-to combo every single game? Whatever thoughts you have about this monster, please let me know in the comments below. I am so looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts. I personally think this monster is quite a powerful dark attacker. When you take a look at everything, the power, the relics, the trait, the skills, there's no denying she is very powerful. But anyhow, that's my personal thought on this monster. I want to hear from all of you guys, so whatever thoughts you have, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much, and I will see you all next time.